It's an honor for me to speak at the 2021 Social Business Youth Summit. I only wish I could join you in person. I'm going to speak for a few minutes about investing for a world of zero carbon emissions. I don't have to tell you why it's important that we address climate change. I'm going to assume that you understand the basic science behind climate change, that emitting more than 50 billion tons of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere every year is warming the planet, and that our only option is to reduce emissions to zero by 2050 if we are to avoid catastrophic climate change. The interesting thing about the challenge of climate change is that while this problem is global and massive, perhaps the biggest challenge ever faced by humans, we know how to solve it. By which I mean, we know very well the sources of the problem, and we already have technologies, commercial technologies, to address more than 50% of the emission reductions needed, with many new technologies under development with the potential to address the remaining emissions. So we understand the problem and we know the solutions. What's there to worry about? The challenge is time. More specifically, we are running out of time. Every year, another 50 billion tons into the atmosphere. Greenhouse gases are long-lived, they're difficult and costly to remove from the atmosphere. Addressing climate change is, therefore, quite simply a race against time. The clock is ticking, and this is where you come in. Young people like yourselves have one advantage over older people. You move quickly. I don't mean just in the physical sense. I mean in creating new businesses, technologies, and solutions to climate change. You can and will move fast. You are unencumbered by the past, which makes you open to new solutions, unlike an older generation, which is more reluctant to change. So what do you need to do? For most of you, the opportunity lies in creating and growing enterprises that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. You don't need to invent new technologies. Addressing climate change does not require much technological innovation, but most of the solutions are about implementing existing technologies. Specifically, the focus now is on renewable energy, electric vehicles, energy storage, energy efficiency, better use of land and the soil, and waste reduction. But it has to be executed with a commercial mindset. That doesn't mean it has to be wildly profitable. Social enterprises can be low profit or even non-profit and require government or donor subsidies. But they must be managed and operated with a mindset of business efficiency and financial sustainability. Why? Because those are the only enterprises that grow to a scale that we need to address this massive climate problem. And then we get to financing. Enterprises focused on climate change with the potential for profit can obtain commercial financing through ESG, that's environmental, social, and governance investors, and or through impact investors. Enterprises that are financially sustainable but low profit or no profit can potentially find financing through development financial institutions and what are called impact first investors. I began working on climate change exactly 20 years ago. At that time, government policies were in place through the UN's Kyoto Protocol and national government initiatives. But the technologies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, such as solar and wind and electric vehicles, were rudimentary and uncompetitive, and there was almost no financing available. In my first business, I spoke with over 100 investors without receiving a single viable offer to invest in my company. Today, 20 years later, everything's changed. Technologies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions are now competitive. Solar and wind are the cheapest source of electricity on the planet. Electric vehicles are replacing the internal combustion engine. Even meat substitutes are gaining acceptance in the marketplace. And that's why capital is finally becoming available. Because investors seek proven solutions to the climate challenge, and now we have those technologies, proven and scalable. So my advice to you, as either an investor or a social entrepreneur, focus on creating and building enterprises that address climate change. It's the most important challenge of your generation. And it's also the greatest opportunity of your generation. Don't just take my word for it. Mark Carney, the former head of the Bank of England, and now the UN Special Envoy on Climate Action and Finance, recently said this, and I quote, "The transition to net zero is creating the greatest commercial opportunity of our age." That's not just wishful thinking. With respect to climate change, there are 4 major trends that are almost certain to increase investment in climate solutions. First, the growing physical impacts of climate change. Rising seas, increasingly strong and dangerous storms, punishing heat and droughts are affecting global economies and businesses, forcing change. Second, In the wake of these physical changes, social change, driven by youth like Greta Thunberg and other young people like yourselves, are raising awareness of climate change. Third, government regulations, especially at the national and subnational level, are incentivizing the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions through carbon taxes and emissions caps, with the goal of net zero emissions within a few decades. And fourth, as I've already mentioned, the dramatic development of technologies to address climate change, like clean energy and transportation. These four trends are driving a fifth trend, the mobilization of capital to invest in climate change solutions. Sometimes referred to as ESG investing, sometimes called impact investing. This capital is now in the hundreds of billions of US dollars and growing rapidly. To Mark Carney's point, these investors believe not only in the need to address climate change, but in the financial returns in doing so. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today, and best wishes to Shazib Islam and the other organizers of the Social Business Youth Summit.